So Daniel 8, where you're going to get to talk about the ram and the goat. So this is going to be the second vision of Daniel. Last week we talked about his first vision. Does anyone remember his first vision that we talked about last week? The four beasts. Four awful, terrifying, horrific beasts that come out of the ocean. And the angel told Daniel that these four beasts were going to be four kingdoms, four dominions that were going to rise after Babylon. Okay? So Daniel has that vision when he is about 66. So it was the first year of Belshazzar. So this dream happens about 2 to 3 years later. Remember, Babylon's kind of funny the way they do their years, but it's about 2 or 3 years later. So Daniel's about 68, 69 now. Okay, so he's getting a little older. And we're going to switch from Babylon and Aramaic, and we're going to switch to Hebrew. Okay, because what is going to happen from here on out is going to center around Israel. But we have to remember at this time, Israel doesn't exist. Okay, Babylon is the height of power in this moment. Okay, Israel doesn't exist, but her people still do. They're just scattered all over the place. But Israel as a country does not exist. Okay, so we need to remember that as we're looking at Daniel's vision here, the way that God portrays Israel. All right. So in verse 1 of Daniel 8, it says, "In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after that which appeared to me at the first. And I saw in the vision, and when I saw, I was in Susa, the citadel, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in the vision, and I was in the Uli canal. I raised my eyes and saw, and behold, a ram standing on the bank of the canal. It had 2 horns, and both horns were high, but one was higher than the other. And the higher one came up last." Okay? So anytime we see here in Daniel that one came up from the other, we see that multiple times, that's Medo-Persia. Okay? So anytime you see that, that's what we're talking about. All right. So Babylon is securely in power. Daniel is about 68, 69. And this is a couple years after his first vision. So this is why he tells us this vision happened later. So the first vision, remember we talked about a framework, kind of like the boundaries of what's going to happen in all of his other visions. But we also remember that Nebuchadnezzar had 2 visions. Okay, so this is mirroring Nebuchadnezzar's 2 visions. Okay, 2 dreams. All right. So there is a little bit of ambiguity here of where Daniel is. He tells us that he sees a vision and he was in a place. So we don't know if he was physically in this place or if in the vision he was in this place. It's a little ambiguous in the Hebrew. It really doesn't matter, but it's kind of interesting to think about because that palace is where the book of Esther's events take place. So the palace in Susa, about 100 years from where Daniel is where the events of the book of Esther take place. Okay, so it's really interesting whether he was there physically on administrative duties or God just picked him up and put him there in vision. 100 years from that moment, Esther happens. Okay, so it's kind of interesting the way that God ties it together here. He could have been anywhere to receive this vision, and this is where God calls him to. Okay, all right, so he sees a ram. We know that that's a male sheep, okay? Big old male sheep, and he's got horns, and he's standing on the bank of the canal, okay? And he has 2 horns that come up, and they're very high horns, and one is higher than the other, okay? So let's go on to verse 4. "I saw the ram charging westward and northward and southward. No beast could stand before him, and there was no one who could rescue from his power. He did as he pleased, and he became great." Okay, so this is clearly representing Medo-Persia because we have the same kind of one rises up and one rises above. So that's the Medes kind of rise up, and the Persians rise up, and then they overshadow the Medes. Okay, this is the empire that will succeed Babylon. Now they are rising in power at this moment of the vision, but they are not fully in power yet. Babylon is on top, but the Medo-Persians are kind of coming up on them, okay? So the ram here is different from what we saw earlier. We saw earlier that it was a Anybody remember the symbol that Daniel saw?
Was that the, no, it wasn't. It was the bear.
The bear, okay. So this is a different symbol, but it's more accurate because history tells us that a Persian ruler bore the head of a ram as he stood in front of his army, okay? So imagine a general, the king, standing up in front of his army, actually had the head of a ram on his head, okay? And their coins were stamped with rams, right? That was basically their national emblem for Persia, okay? So it's not a stretch that the ram represents Medo-Persia here. All right, so we have the two horns, one higher than the other, okay? And then we see that their power extends to the north and the south and the west, which is very interesting because at that moment, Medo-Persia is just starting all of their campaigns, but they never go east. History tells us that even after Daniel passes away and Medo-Persia still reigns, they never go towards the east. So it's very interesting that God puts this little detail in here. They go north, they go south, they go west, but they never go east, okay? No major conquest to the east. Absolutely accurate.
What was the east?
East of Persia would have been Asia. They never go that way. They only go north, south, and west. So it's kind of interesting there. All right, so let's go on to verse 8. We're going to find out what happens to this ram. So, or verse 5. And as I was considering, behold, a male goat came from the west across the face of the whole earth without touching the ground. Okay, so this other animal, this male goat, comes from the west, and he's coming so fast it's like he's flying. Okay, his just paws aren't touching the ground. He's going so fast. Okay, and the goat had a conspicuous horn between its eyes. Okay, I don't know if you've ever seen a goat. They're usually not unicorns, right? They usually have two horns, and they're usually little tiny horns. This one has a horn, and it's very noticeable. Okay, so he came up to the ram with two horns, which I had seen standing on the bank of the canal, and he ran at him with his powerful wrath. Okay, so imagine Daniel, he's just standing there, right, in his vision, and he sees this ram, this beautiful ram, and he's like considering it, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, Daniel looks, and this goat just comes running and rams into him, okay? So Daniel goes, what in the world is going on here? Okay, so I had seen him standing on the bank of the canal, and he ran at him with his wrathful power. I saw him come close to the ram, and he was enraged against him and struck the ram and broke his two horns. And the ram had no power to stand before him, but he cast him down on the ground and trampled him. Okay, so this is the goat. The goat rams into the ram. The ram falls so hard that his horns break, and the goat just then tramples on top of him. Okay, and there was no one who could rescue the ram from his power. Then the goat became exceedingly great, but when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and instead there came up 4 conspicuous horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. Okay, so this is a really odd picture and vision here that Daniel's getting. He's just by this canal, and he sees this ram, and it's got these 2 horns that are kind of offset, and then all of a sudden this goat just comes out of nowhere, bashes into the ground, breaks his horns, tramples all over him, and then he's the victor, but then all of a sudden his horn breaks, and he grows 4 new ones, okay? So it's kind of interesting here. Later in this chapter, we're going to be told who the ram and the goat are, okay? So the goat is actually Greece, who will come up after Medo-Persia.
But then the 4 horns throw me off.
Okay, we're gonna get to the 4 horns. The 4 horns are gonna be repeated a lot, so we're gonna come back to them. All right, so this is definitely Greece that did come after Medo-Persia, and Greece came from the west, okay? The west of Persia, the Greeks come out. All right, now, this is a very, very specific prophecy here. The Greek Empire rose from the west, which they did. They rose up suddenly with great speed. They literally just come out of nowhere. The horn, remember we talked about the horn represents rulers, okay? Greece had a very notable ruler, Alexander the Great. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's very, very noticeable. okay? And they had a famous war between the Medos and the Persians, okay? They greatly hated each other. There was not two groups of empires on earth between the Medo-Persians and the Greeks. They absolutely destroyed each other with just rage and fury. They did not hold back, okay? Some of the most greatest, fiercest battles that history records are between these two groups of people, okay? And then the Greek Empire conquers over Medo-Persia. No one could save them. But Alexander the Great's reign just gets cut off, okay? He actually dies of a 10-day fever, and they think it was typhoid. But he's at the height of his power, and he gets sick and he dies suddenly, okay? It's very, very sudden that he is cut short, so that horn gets broken. And at the end of Alexander's reign, 4 generals rise up in his place. And we're going to talk a lot about those 4 generals as we go on. But these 4 generals come up and they spread out. So Alexander's whole area that he spread out to, the 4 generals kind of take 4 of the corners of the world from him, okay? But Alexander the Great is very, very important to us, okay? Alexander the Great was so determined to spread the Greek civilization, culture, and language in every place he conquered, okay? This prepared the way for his chosen Greek language, Koine Greek, to become the language of the New Testament, okay? So we would not have the New Testament without Alexander the Great, okay? Without this horn that comes up, we would not have our New Testament today, okay? So we can thank Alexander the Great for our New Testament. All right, so let's go on to verse 9. And it says, out of one of them, so out of the 4 horns, so we've got 4 horns on this goat, right? Out of one of them came a little horn. We've read about a little horn before, remember? Daniel knows this. It's only been 2 years, and he sees a little horn again. And Daniel's going, oh, I know about this little horn, right? Well, out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south and toward the east and toward the glorious land. So the glorious land is Israel, okay? It grew great, even to the host of heaven, and some of the host and some of the stars it threw down to the ground and trampled on it. It became great, even as great as the prince of the host. And the regular burnt offering was taken away from him, and the place of his sanctuary was overthrown. And a host will be given over it together with the regular burnt offering because of the transgression. And it will throw truth to the ground, and it will act and prosper. Okay, so that's a lot, so let's break that down. Okay, so this happens in history. So out of the 4 horns, we have one that kind of rises up that takes notice. And we're going to talk a lot more about the 4 horns, so this is just kind of an overview. We're going to swing back around to them later on, but I'm going to give you an overview. All right, so this gentleman is let me try that again. Antiochus is his name, Antiochus IV, and he ruled over Syria and Israel. Okay, so he ruled over the south and the east and toward the glorious land. All right. Now, he accurately and dramatically fulfills almost all of the prophecies concerning this little horn, okay? So much so, you can literally take the book of Daniel and the visions of Daniel and line it up with everything that we know about him from history, and it almost matches perfectly. Almost matches perfectly. So much so that there are people who do not believe the book of Daniel was written before that man existed. Okay, but we have proof that Daniel was written 350 plus years earlier, that wrote about all of these specific details, and yet 50 years later, this man's life just mirrors exactly what's in Daniel. So much so that people go, Daniel could not have possibly written this before that man existed. It had to have been written afterwards. Okay? This is how complete that God fulfills every single prophecy that is in here. So, Antiochus, he was dominant in the south and the east and over Israel. He murdered rulers and persecuted people of Israel, okay? That is when we see the stars that get thrown down. Stars in the Old Testament can be rulers, they can be God's people, okay? That has multiple meanings to the stars. He does throw down rulers and he persecutes the people of Israel. He absolutely blasphemes God. That's who is listed here as the prince of the host, okay? That's the host of heaven, God. And he's the one who has these sacrifice systems in place. This guy absolutely blasphemes God. Okay, we're going to talk a lot about that. He stops the temple sacrifices in Jerusalem. He sets up an altar to Zeus and sacrifices a pig on it in the middle of the Jerusalem temple. Big no-no. Big no-no. It absolutely has to stop the sacrifices because their temple has been desecrated. Okay? He absolutely opposed God and he seemed to prosper because he got away with a lot of it. Okay? So, we see this fulfillment, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about his fulfillment and what happens through those 4 different generals in another vision. But he's one of the most famous persecutors of the Jewish people. He wanted them to submit so much to the Greek culture that he was more than willing to use violence and murder to get his way. Okay? He basically was a dictator who said, if you don't bow to what I want, I have no problem just killing you. Okay? So that's what he used to get his way. Now, one of the very first attacks that he had on the Jewish people was to settle a rivalry over the high priest. Okay? So we have the position of high priest in the Temple of Jerusalem, right? And this is a very important position. Who was this supposed to go to?
Levites.
They're supposed to stay within the Levi family. By this point, okay, we're in 172-ish BC. That's no longer true, okay? The Levites do not have the high priest position anymore, okay? So there's contention for who becomes the high priest.
So when did the Levites approximately lose, or were no longer really represented?
It wasn't too much earlier before this. I don't remember the exact date. There was a lot of contention that happened. And so basically,
now is this when the book of
yeah,
Maccabees
so
is
we're right
occurring?
around here. So that's the time frame that we're in. Yeah, so we're gonna go over that. Okay, so this is what starts the Maccabee Revolution, which we're gonna talk about. Okay, so there is a gentleman who is currently the high priest. Okay, Onassis III. He's not a Levite, but he's in position right now. Okay, so he is removed from the position because he's very pompous and pious, and so they decided to kick him out and remove him. And he gets replaced by his brother. His brother is Jason. Okay, so Jason now becomes the high priest. But the reason why he did is because Jason bribed Antiochus. Okay, he sent him a bribe and said, hey, if you remove my brother and set me up as high priest, I'll be sure to, give you some kickbacks and, I'll be loyal to you and stuff like that. This is what you really want. You want somebody who's loyal to you. I can get these Jews in line. So Antiochus agrees, this guy gets removed, and Jason's now the high priest. Okay? So in 172 BC, another brother, okay, Menelaus, he decides that, oh, my brother was pretty smart. All we have to do is bribe the guy. Well, I can do that. So he bribes him with an even bigger bribe, and Antiochus says, cool, okay, we'll just remove Jason, and now you get to be the high priest. Okay? So now Menelaus is the high priest. Okay? Menelaus isn't as rich as his brothers. He really can't afford the bribe that he promised Antiochus. Well, he looks around in the temple and he goes, got a bunch of gold and silver and okay, I'll just start selling this stuff off. So he starts selling off pieces of the temple to pay for his bribe to be the high priest. Okay, can you start seeing the dissension here? Alright, so he starts selling off the utensils and start paying off the bride. Well, his older brother is not happy about this at all, okay? So he rebukes him, and he's telling him, you really shouldn't be doing this. This is not the way to be handling this situation. Well, Menelaus, not wanting to give up his spot, just has his brother killed. Okay? These are the high priest people, okay? The high priest in Jerusalem. So he just has his brother killed. Alright, he has him murdered. Meanwhile, Jason here sees all of this going on between his brothers, and it's like, this is the perfect time to raise an army. So he raises up an army because he's going to fight for the position of high priest now, because that's the way he sees this is going. Okay? So there's all this contention going on for about a year or so, and Antiochus is like, I've had enough of this. I'm going to go settle this. So he comes to Jerusalem, and he basically starts a war. Okay? The Maccabean Revolution happens during this time, so he comes to Jerusalem and he starts a war with the people. It is estimated that during this time, he is responsible for over 100,000 Jewish deaths. And we're going to get more specific in that later on. But that's a safe estimate during this time. All on his head. Okay? Because he comes and he starts an all-out war. Okay? So he suppresses the Jews for a couple of years, and we know on December of 168 BC, he returns to Jerusalem because he's going back and forth, and he ordered his generals to seize the temple on a Sabbath day, which is a big no-no, okay? And there in the temple, he stops everything and he sets up an altar to Zeus, who's a Greek god, right, in the middle of their temple, okay? And he sacrifices a pig, and he takes the pig's blood and he sprinkles it all over the temple, absolutely defiling the temple, okay? And the sacrifices stop right there and then because they cannot sacrifice with pig's blood everywhere, okay? So all of this is going on, but did you notice our dates? We have 172 BC and 168 BC, okay? Versus Daniel, this is hundreds of years later. There's no way Daniel could have known all of this. And yet it reads exactly like it here, and he became great, even as great as the prince of the host, and the regular burnt offering was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was overthrown. I was talking about God's sacrifices, God's temple. And a host will be given over to it with the regular burnt offering because of the transgression, and it will be thrown to the ground, and it will seem to prosper. So at the end of this, we look at this and go, God, how could you allow this to happen? This Greek general comes in here and just absolutely destroys your temple and your people. Okay, it has taken them this long to get the temple up and running again, right? To get it running back at its height. And then this Greek guy comes in and he just destroys it all over again. And our high priests are killing each other and fighting with each other and bribing Greek officials. I mean, this is just absolutely a horrendous time that happens. Daniel is seeing this vision play out in his mind, but he doesn't get to see it happen. This is 350 years later, okay? But this is what Daniel sees, okay? So verse 13 says, then that's Daniel, then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the one who spoke, okay? So we're not told where these holy ones come from, because in Daniel's vision, he's alone with this ram and this goat. He doesn't tell us there's anyone else there. But then there's these angels who are there, and they're having a conversation about the vision, okay? And Daniel hears them talking to one another, okay? So one says to the other, for how long is the vision concerning the regular burnt offering, the transgression that makes desolate, and the giving over of the sanctuary and hosts to be trampled underfoot, okay? So the angels are talking to each other about this vision. And they go, how long is God going to let this happen? How could he let this happen? And how long is he going to let this happen? In verse 14 it says, and he said to me, so one of the angels told Daniel, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful state. Okay, so Daniel is witnessing all of this, and he's not the one who asked this question, okay? The angels are talking to one another, and they literally tell him 2,300 days, okay? Evenings and mornings are days, which is just over 6 years, a little over 6 years, okay? So we know, based on history, that on December 25th, okay, 165 BC, the temple is cleansed and restored. Okay, so that's when the sacrifices start back up again. This is after the Maccabean Revolution, okay? Cleansed and restored. So if we count backwards 2,300 days, we come back to 171, 172 BC. Right at the start of this. Right at the start of all of this dissension that happens in the high priest and Antiochus coming down, okay? So we can count backwards here and know exactly all of this. This is one of the biggest reasons why people say Daniel had to have been written after this. Writing to show that God had planned this, okay? Because if you were a Jew watching all of this happen, you could not have believed that God had told you about it 350 years before, right? You would have had to have said, no, okay, we need to encourage these people, because obviously we have to deal with all of this stuff, right? So we need to encourage these people. Like, God had a plan, God knew it, right? We needed to encourage them. No, this prophecy was written 350 years before. God knew that it was going to happen, and he knew that his people needed to prepare for it, and that they needed to know that he was going to be in control of all of this, okay? This did not surprise God at all, all right? Okay, so, verse 15. When I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought to understand it, okay? And behold, there stood before me one having the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, and it called, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was frightened and fell on my face. But he said to me, understand, O son of man, that the vision is for the time of the end. And when he spoke to me, I fell into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. I bet he did. But he touched me and made me stand up. And he said, behold, I will make known to you what shall be in the later end of the indignation. And it refers to the appointed time at the end. Okay? So Daniel is watching all of this unfold. He's seeing it as a vision, right? He's not seeing the events of history, but he's seeing this vision happen. And he does not understand it. Okay? Remember, Daniel's the smartest man in Babylon. And he doesn't understand what's going on right now. Okay? So he hears a voice, a man's voice, call for Gabriel. So we assume that this is probably one of the two messengers that are standing there. But he calls Gabriel, and the voice tells Gabriel, tell Daniel what this means. Okay? Tell Daniel what this means. So Gabriel comes over to Daniel, and Daniel, when the angel gets close to him and starts talking to him, and he says, understand, O son of man, that the vision is for the end times. Okay, the time at the end, Daniel just falls down on the ground, passes out, can't even stand up, he's got his face in the concrete, okay? He cannot believe that this holy angel is talking to him, okay? And is going to tell him what's getting ready to happen.
Do we think this is a different angel than so earlier when they talked about how long will it take?
It's probably one of those who were talking to each other. We aren't told who the other one is, but Daniel probably saw them talking to each other, and then God told him, hey Gabriel, go tell Daniel what's going on. Yeah. Which is kind of interesting, right? Daniel's kind of this bystander to all of these heavenly events that are getting ready to play out in history, And God goes, hey, Gabriel, Daniel's confused. Can you go talk to him? Make him understand. It's going to happen way after him. Go talk to Daniel, right? I love this about God. He's like, Gabriel, go talk to him. Go help him understand. All right. And I love that when Daniel has his face in the ground and he's just completely can't even stand in the presence of this angel. Okay, the angel touches him and makes him stand up. He's like, come on, Daniel, get up. It's okay, bud. We're gonna have a little chat. It's okay. Stand up. All right, stand up. Okay. So Gabriel assures Daniel that this has to do with the end times, the later judgment. Now, this is a problem for some people because we can take all of these prophecies and we can line them up with Antiochus, right? And we can say, listen, it's already been fulfilled to us, but the angel tells them that it's going to happen at the end times, the later times, okay? The answer is because we always have a tool full of prophecy, right? We always have a prophecy and a prophecy, okay? So, it is fulfilled in Antioch, and it will be fulfilled at the end, okay? So the Jews at this time got a taste of what's coming, okay? This was just a taste. As awful as this is, it was like God's little preview, this little trailer for what was going to happen at the end of times, okay? So Daniel doesn't experience this, but Gabriel tells him, now you think this is bad. This is going to be nothing compared to what's coming. Okay? All right, verse 20 says, so this is still Gabriel talking, and he says, behold, I will make known to you what shall be in the later time of the indignation, and it refers to the appointed time of the end. As for the ram that you saw, so he's going to take him all the way back to the ram. He's going to explain to him what all of this is. As for the ram that you saw with the two horns, these are the kings of Media and Persia. Okay? The goat is the king of Greece, Alexander the Great. And the great horn between his eyes is the first king. As for the horn that was broken, in place of which 4 others rose, 4 kingdoms shall arise from his nation, but not with his power. Okay? So Gabriel explains the vision to Daniel. He tells him, the ram with the 2 horns, you were correct, that's Medo-Persia. Okay? The goat is the king of Greece, with the horn, that's Alexander. And the broken horn means that king's going to die, and 4 more are going to rise up for him. Okay? All of this happens exactly as Gabriel told him. All right? So going on to verse 23. And, okay, so he adds, and at the later end of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their limit, a king bold of face, one who understands riddles, shall arise. His power shall be great, but not by his own power. And he shall cause fearful destruction, and shall succeed in what he does, and destroy mighty men and the people who are the saints. By his cunning he shall make deceit prosper under his hand, and in his own mind he shall become great. Without warning he will destroy many, and he shall even rise against the prince of princes, and he shall be broken, but by no human hand. The vision of the evenings and mornings that has been told is true, but seal up the vision, for it refers to many days from now. Okay, so Gabriel explains to him this whole vision, right? And he tells him everything that's getting ready to happen, that this is a future event for Daniel, okay? Daniel's not going to get to experience this. He doesn't live to be 350 plus years old. But he tells them this is exactly what's going to happen that's going to come after you, all right? So this prophecy is equally true of Antiochus. It will also be equally true of the Antichrist, okay? This is this both near and far revelation, okay? Antiochus was absolutely known for his cruelty. He did not let taking someone's life stand in his way, okay? So will be the Antichrist, okay? Antiochus was known for his flattery and his smooth tongue. Remember our little horn with the big mouth? Okay? The Antichrist will also be such. Antiochus looked like a total success. At the end of his life, it looked like he had done what no one else could do. Okay? He was a total success in the eyes of everyone. so too the Antichrist will be. He will look like an absolute global success as he topples God and God's people, okay? Antiochus not only destroyed his enemies, but he harshly persecuted the Jews. He targeted them and went after them, okay? Even though he was Greek, okay? The coming Antichrist will also do the same thing, okay? He will destroy and he will persecute the people of God. So both Antiochus in the past and the Antichrist in the future, they're both marked by deceit, okay? Remember this whole bribery situation that started a war, okay? Absolutely marked by deceit.
So, it won't be just the Jews though, it'll be anyone who believes in God.
Right.
I mean, that's-
It'll be God's people, which is why we have the saints mentioned. So it's just holy ones, separated ones, not just the Jews. Yeah. So that's why Gabriel is kind of explaining to him, like, you're going to see some foreshadowing of the future, but it's going to be also all the way at the end. Yep, absolutely. All right, Antiochus decreed that he should be worshipped as Zeus. So he set up this image of Zeus in the temple, but he expected them to worship him as Zeus, right? And he actually had coins inscribed with Theo Epiphanes, which means God manifested. Basically, like, I'm here because the gods want me to be here. The gods manifested me to be here. And he took on that title for himself. Okay? The Antichrist will also exalt himself in 2 Corinthians 2:14, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. This is what Antiochus did. He literally goes into the Jewish temple and sets up an idol and claims himself to be God. Okay? This is a little picture of what's going to happen. And history tells us that Antioch died of a disease. He had a raging fever for about 10 days, so no man killed him. He did not die at the hand of a man. Okay? He died at the hand of God. All right? Can I tell you where this Greek guy died? He died in Babylon. He was partying in Babylon, and he got a fever, probably typhoid, and he dies. Okay? In a similar way, no man will defeat the Antichrist. It will be by the hand of Jesus who strikes him down, Revelation 19:20. Okay? So no man took out either one of these. But Gabriel tells him to seal up the vision, okay, because it will refer to a period in the distant future. Okay? So for him, it was 350 years, and also our other one. But we're told in Revelation 22:10 that all the books are unsealed, that the revelation is unsealed, okay? But for Daniel back here, Gabriel tells him, you gotta seal this up. It's not time yet, okay? It's not time yet. Now this probably refers to many times when they had certain documents like wills or things like that, you had to seal it and put it away, okay? What we would say, we would, take it to a lawyer and get a lawyer's stamp of approval on it, but it didn't become active until the person died. So that's very similar here in the Old Testament and ancient times, is that when they had to document events of the future, like wills, they would seal them, okay, for future, when they would break the seal, okay? So that's what Gabriel is telling Daniel. Listen, you've got to seal it up because it's not for right now. It will happen in the future. We're going to seal it and we're going to put it aside, okay? And then we get the unsealing. We get revelation.
So he wrote this particular portion of the book down, and it was,
And we have it.
so the seal was broken.
Yeah.
But he did actually write it down.
He wrote it all down. Yeah.
But does that mean he didn't share it?
So that's probably where some of this dating and stuff comes from, is because if an angel told you to seal it up, you'd probably obey, right? So it was probably sealed during Daniel's life, but remember, he's like 68, 69, so he doesn't live much further. After him, they probably unsealed his books physically, but God's saying this is also spiritual, as in, hold on to this, is coming in the future.
So after he died, if they unsealed them and looked at them, then they were
probably very confused.
right.
It didn't have
Writing
any
a bad man is probably
right?
people.
But someone kept it because we have it, right? So
This
physically,
is probably the wrong question, but so what was the purpose of the vision? If you were, yeah,
for him to record it. So that these Jews could have gone back and read Daniel and known that God knew exactly what was happening. Because if you were a Jew at this time and you saw all of this happening, your first thought is why? Why in the world are you letting all of this happen? And if you had a document dating 350 years before that showed exactly what was going to happen, would you trust that God? Would you trust that God even though all of this is happening?
If you cross the days off the calendar.
Right? Daniel told him. The angel told him the exact days. So could you imagine when all of this starts, we could just sit here and cross off days off the calendar. About 6 years. We know we're going to be persecuted for about 6 years.
Now, have they read the Jews of this time?
Should
Read?
have.
So yes, it would have been recorded at this
Oh,
point.
yeah.
I mean,
Oh, well, way before here, we have the whole Old Testament that has been completely finished and sealed. So we have all the prophets, including Daniel. We have Genesis. We have the Psalms. We have the whole entire Old Testament.
and they're being taught this in the temple.
And they are being taught it, not faithfully, by our high priest, right? A lot of people are illiterate. How many of them are gonna read Daniel? And Daniel didn't even understand the vision.
But they also had to trust that what the priest was telling them was true.
Yep.
So the priests could have left things purposely out.
Yep.
Also.
But there's also an oral tradition that's happening, which was an expected part of their culture, is that you would pass down these stories orally as well as written. So even if maybe your high priest wasn't doing such a great job, you could go to somebody who knew the stories and could verbally tell you the stories. So that was an expectation that people should have known, right? So it is God's way of showing to Daniel and to his people in the future, don't worry, okay? Even if things look absolutely awful, I told you this was going to happen. It's so difficult. But how much easier is it to trust that God?
I still trust him, but I still worry.
Right?
It's that
Okay, let's wrap up with the last verse and then we'll come back to this conversation. Alright, and the last verse says, "And I, Daniel, was overcome and lay sick for some days." So you are in the same boat as Daniel, right? "And then I arose and went about the king's business, but I was appalled by the vision and did not understand it." So we're in the same boat with Daniel. Daniel is the smartest person in Babylon. And it makes him so physically ill seeing all of this happen to his people that he is laid sick up for a couple of days. But then after that, he goes back to work, right? He goes back to the business, okay? But he was so appalled by the vision and he doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand all of these visions. God, why are you allowing this to happen? How could you let our people are already suffering in Babylon. They're scattered all over the place. We don't even have a temple. We don't even have a state. And you're telling us we're going to get it back just to have it taken back again. So Daniel doesn't understand all of this either. How could he possibly understand what God was trying to show him? Right? He was just human. We can look back and go, how did you not see this? How did you not see all of this as it was happening? But remember, all of this hasn't even happened yet for Daniel. So he doesn't understand any of this. He's just seeing a ram and a goat and these angels are talking and he doesn't understand any of it. Okay? This is probably an explanation of why Daniel's semi-retired, right? Because he does not trust this king, King Belshazzar. He doesn't trust him at all. He sees what these angels are talking about, that these kings are going to arise after Medo-Persia, and they're just absolutely going to desolate his people. So he is just absolutely sick with what's getting ready to happen to his people. Okay? So he doesn't understand the vision, but God does not reveal something he doesn't want us to understand. At the end of the day, he wanted Daniel to understand this, and he wanted us to understand it. Otherwise, why reveal it? Why tell you all of this if you are never going to understand it, right? When all of this happens, and when all of this will happen, okay, it is a testimony for us to look back and say, God, you know what you're doing. You control every bit of human history, and you have a place for your people. Even when they're persecuted, even when they're the target of empire after empire after empire, right? The Jews don't hold some kind of secret, right? They're not sitting on a pot of gold and oil and all the things. They are literally desert people who haven't amounted to much in history. But you know what? They're still here. After all of this, they're still here. Because they have a God who absolutely loves them and wants to take care of them. Okay? As much persecution has happened. And so Gabriel reminds him it's also going to be in the future. So when we face persecution, whether to this level or not, we should be able to look back and go, God, you have been absolutely faithful. You absolutely know history because you wrote it, right? Before all of these events happened, he gave Daniel, he said, Daniel, write it down. Daniel, seal it up. It's coming, okay? It is absolutely a sign of faith and perseverance, no matter what is going on. Because Daniel is sitting in a foreign palace underneath the rule of a foreign king, and all of his people are scattered, but he knows in 70 years they're going to get their country back. They're going to get their temple back, and all the people are going to come back. And God says yes, for a time, and then it's going to be taken away again, and then it gets restored, and then it's going to be taken away again. Okay? So God has absolutely written history. And we also understand that it's okay we don't understand prophecy. Daniel's the smartest man in Babylon, and he doesn't understand all of this. So it's absolutely okay when we read prophecy and we go, what in the world, God? What does that mean? Right? If anybody's read Revelation, you go, what? What is this? And what is this? And what is this? And what does this mean? What does this mean? Okay? We're in the same boat as Daniel. We're just called to trust that God knows what he's doing. God absolutely knows what he is doing. Alright, so going back to this. Any other questions? Comments? I wanted to get to the last verse before we came back.
Because of free will, is that why we have to go through all of this? I don't know how to put it. Like, 'cause God at any time could just say, you're just gonna believe in me, and you're not gonna do anything wrong, and toe the line type thing. But as humans, we like buck the system.
Right.
You know, and is it because he allows us to have that free will to...
Free will is such a delicate,
I don't know.
two-sided coin. It's such a balance, because would you want to serve a God who forces you to? That's what he was trying to do.
Right.
He was trying to force them to worship him as God, as a God. Okay? That's not loyalty. Right?
But why does he allow us to... I mean, with like Adam and Eve, I mean, like, they had everything and everything.
They had the evenings with God. God came down and walked with them every evening. They could ask him any question. They could talk to him. And they traded it all.
Right.
Because they had a choice to. Because every time we have a choice to, we have the choice to choose him. We have a choice not to choose him. So he gives us that. Hoping that we're going to choose him. Hoping that we trust him enough to choose him. Because he's given us all the evidence to trust him. We can look back and we can put all of this together. I mean, we're not done talking about him. We're going to come back to him because he's fun. But we look all of this and we should go, okay, I trust you. I don't understand.
No.
I'm with Daniel. I don't understand. I trust you.
No, I mean, obviously none of us want to go through any of the bad stuff. We ultimately know in the end it's all going to work out, but it's...
But walking through it.
It's very, very, very...
How many of those lost their life walking through it?
Difficult. And I hope that if ever faced with that choice, that I make the right one. Like, even if death is my option, the only other option is, you know, bow down and worship something that's false,
right,
or die. I hope that I am strong enough to say, okay, then it's my time.
But how much easier that choice knowing all of this versus not knowing anything?
True. I mean, it is easier, but still.
It's not easy.
It's not.
Not easy. Daniel wasn't easy for Daniel.
No.
But it was easier.
Right.
Knowing who he was worshiping. Knowing who he was betting his life on. That is why God gives us all of this. He gave us all of this. And if you know the story of how this got in your hands, you would never let this thing leave your side. It is absolutely incredible that we have stuff from thousands of years ago because God protected his word. And he kept it, okay? And he shows us through history these little glimpses. This was just a little glimpse. This was an awful time. It is going to be nothing compared to what's coming, okay? They got a little taste of what was coming, okay? A little preview, a little trailer. The worst is yet to come, okay? All right, so I want to give you hope that in light of these visions, our next chapter, Daniel prays. Okay, so the next entire chapter, chapter 9, God is going to ask for things. He is going to pray very unique prayers in light of these visions, and God is going to answer in some very unique ways. And we're going to get to see that next week, how God answers Daniel's prayers.